10,000 people now have the phone number of Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick. Hey folks, this is Riker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include an update on how the pandemic has been affecting certain game developers, the thoughts of a Diablo 3 artist on the challenges that Diablo 4's art direction will face, some potential fallout between Bethesda and the composer of Doom's soundtrack Mick Gordon, and more. As always, discussion timestamps can be found in the video description below. But right before you skip ahead, just a quick reminder to ring that sub notification bell to be alerted to new Saturday episodes and stay up to date with gaming news highlights. In our first story, it appears that Mick Gordon and Bethesda may be parting ways. Mick Gordon is the composer of the soundtrack to Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, and his music is regarded by fans as an instrumental, no pun intended, part of the game's appeal and success. Now recently, the soundtrack for Doom Eternal was released, but the quality of the mixing on the soundtrack doesn't seem up to par with what we expect from Mick Gordon. Now, if you don't know what mixing means in the context of music, a very brief overview is that effectively, when you have a song, there are multiple tracks or multiple instruments, let's say, that all come together. And depending on the individual volumes of all of these elements within the song, that can come out very muddy, like everything is just drowning everything out, or it could come very crisp and clear with the different sounds highlighting each other and offering moments of more quietness and other louder moments of intensity. And this is the difference between a well-mixed track and a poorly mixed track. Now, someone tweeted to Mick Gordon saying that the mixing on the soundtrack was terrible, and Gordon replied, quote, "I didn't mix those and wouldn't have done that. You'll be able to spot the small handful of tracks I mixed. So why didn't the composer of the soundtrack get to do most of the mixing? And why is he basically taking a dump on the work that was produced?" I mean, he's not outright saying it, but his comment is tacitly agreeing that yes, the mixing is terrible. Well, allegedly when asked if he would work on another Doom game, in a private message, Mick Gordon replied, quote, "Doubt we'll work together again." Now, assuming this is true, what we're not sure of is whether Mick is referring to the developer of the game, id, or the publisher, Bethesda. But we can see a YouTube comment from Mick on a cover of a song from Doom Eternal in which he says, quote, "Fun fact, all those stupid time signature changes are a result of someone from marketing piecing this track together without any musical knowledge." So Mick has already not hidden his disdain for marketing people, and marketing tends to fall to the publisher and not the developer. If you're a fan of the series, how disappointed would you be if the next Doom game does not feature the music of Mick Gordon? Sound off in the comments. Now on to our next story, which is something of a lark. Some intrepid game developers have put together a pitch for a game based on the classic TV sitcom Seinfeld. Now it should be noted that this is the same developer as the game Paradigm, which was a very well received comedy point-and-click game. So they have proven themselves. On their website, the devs state that they are just huge fans of the show, and quote, "We don't want to just create a fan service game that repeats jokes or plots that people already are familiar with. We will write a brand new story revolving around the Seinfeld characters designed to work in this medium, remaining faithful to the tone and themes of the show." I really enjoyed Seinfeld back in the day, so I do wish the developers luck in getting this project off the ground. On to some news about upcoming video game convention, PAX West. On their website, the organizers stated, quote, "We wanted to let everyone know that as of this moment, we're still planning on putting together a great PAX West this coming Labor Day weekend, September 4th to 7th. Now this message, of course, comes in response to everything going on with the pandemic and all the other gaming conventions and other conventions that have been cancelled to date. The organizers go on to say, as the year progresses, we will continue to monitor the situation and work with health officials at all levels of government and intend to follow all CDC and WHO guidelines as they are released. So in short, they will cancel the convention if they feel they have to, but as of right now, they are still planning to have it. On to some Baldur's Gate 3 news. The game is still on track to release this year, 2020, but things have been delayed due to quarantine. When describing how developer Larian Studios has adjusted to the self-quarantine, Chief Executive Sven Vink stated, quote, "The very first week, it went really well. Everyone had all the information they needed to just smoothly go work from home. However, after that first week," he states, quote, "we started seeing more stress on the leads in terms of communication. We'd spend all of our days just communicating, trying to solve problems, organize things, give direction." But Vink affirms that an early access beta launch for end of year is still on track. And he estimates that, as for now, the team is operating at about 70 to 80% of their normal productivity. Onto some Activision Blizzard news. Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick gave his personal phone number out to all of his employees, which amount to nearly 10,000 people. Speaking to CNBC, Kotick said, quote, "About a month ago, we sent out an email from my email address with my phone number, and we encouraged every single employee that has a concern that relates to their healthcare to just contact me directly." And apparently a few hundred employees took Kotick up on that offer and gave him a call. I'll admit that that's not the kind of headline I expect to hear about Bobby Kotick, but good for him. Activision Blizzard employees have swapped to working from home for some time now. And the company also paid for any internet upgrades that they needed in order to do that, and allowed workers to take home any equipment that was necessary for the job. And despite everything going on, Activision Blizzard's stock has reached a 52-week high. Now, it's nowhere close to its peak back in late September 2018, but the stock has been steadily crawling out of the crater that it reached in February 2019. And a big reason for the recent success is the release of Call of Duty Warzone, which drew 30 million players within 10 days of its release on March 10th, making it the fastest growing non-mobile title of all time. And Kotick also said, quote, "Most of our games are seeing record levels of engagement, which should come as no surprise seeing the Steam numbers and how, amidst everyone forced to stay home, people are gaming more." Now let's finish up with some Diablo news. Starting with Diablo 3, it broke late last week that for the rest of Season 20, we'll have double goblins. This means that each time you encounter a treasure goblin in the wild, they'll be accompanied by an exact duplicate of themselves for 2 times the loot. Note that this does not affect goblins encountered via bandit shrines, goblin packs, or in the realm of greed. It does nothing for rainbow goblins, and the insufferable miscreant is not doubled. Now, if you haven't yet collected all the pets that you can via the maianashira goblin, I encourage you to do that during this buff. You can check out my old video on farming goblins. In other Diablo news, Diablo 3 concept artist Trent Kaniuga hopped on Reddit and answered some questions that people had about Diablo. Now, Trent did about 75% of Diablo 3's armor designs, and as one of the 4 concept artists on Diablo 3, he also did a lot of the concept art for environments. When asked about the exaggerated proportions of the pauldrons and the helmets in Diablo 3, as contrasted to Diablo 2, Trent stated, quote, "I had to go overboard with the headgear and armor to make it unique from each other. One of the challenges that D4 faces with a new art style is that feeling of progression with armor. There needs to be distinct silhouette changes in order to feel like a progression. It's a catch-22. Some people want that Conan kind of world, where one sword only looks different from another sword if you're close up. But Diablo is a game with a zoomed-out camera. Shapes and proportions need to be bold to immediately give the player a feeling of change and progression. Not everyone on the development team agreed with this, and it was highly debated. However, it's one of the reasons why the art director made me design armor sets. Stylization has always been my strength. Now, this does make me wonder, is this perhaps the reason why in the Diablo 4 UI currently, we see that in addition to having that UI screen with all of your gear, you have that 3D model of your character right there, so that, yes, even if the changes are more subtle, because we're in a more zoomed in view, they're more immediately obvious to the player, so you still retain that sense of progression and upgrade. When asked why he left Blizzard, Trent said, "I left Blizzard because I did not feel connected with the players. With the company growing from 100 people to 6,000 people, it wasn't the same company anymore. I loved working at Blizzard when it felt like an indie company." He also gave some insight into Diablo 3's tumultuous development. Quote, "Development was completely rebooted in late 2007 when I joined that team. nothing from Blizzard North was used. He's referring to the fact that Diablo 3 was originally being developed by the developers of Diablo 2, aka Blizzard North, before most of those developers left Blizzard and Blizzard North was shut down. It took 5 years to finish Diablo 3 ever since the reboot. We lost 4 art directors and some senior staff left the project halfway through. It was a long development. At times it felt that we would never finish. We threw away large sections of the game and reworked them over and over. It is a miracle that it came together in the end. There was a ton of unreleased content that was cut or unfinished. And when probed about what kind of content was cut, he said, quote, "There was an entire chapter cut, but it was unnecessary. Scovos was cut, and Lacuni caverns were cut. It would have tried to build primitive Lacuni structures into the side of the cliff, and played around with verticality. I'd presented design solutions for moving platforms as well, but it had been 4.5 years and the team was eager to finish the project." Great insight from Trent, and I'll post a link to that in the video description below. And that's gonna wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to have checked out last week's video, in which we showcase a couple fan remasters of some Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 content. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content. Sign up to be one of Riker's Raiders, where once a month, you too can make me say things like, "Rock music is omnipresent, much like candy."